All right, so you're telling me Wilt Chamberlain was a better scorer than James Harden, a better rebounder than Dennis Rodman, and we give so many props to LeBron James for leading the league in assists? Yeah, Wilt did that as an old school center. His records are unbeatable. The 100-point game, averaged over 50 points per game for a season. Of the top 5 highest scoring seasons, one's Michael Jordan, the other 4 all Wilt. His numbers are so big, they almost look fake. And he was really efficient too. Wilt led the league in field goal percentage 9 times.
9 times?
9 times.
In his own book, he claims to have slept with over 20,000 women. Enter inappropriate joke here. So why is he not even in the conversation for the greatest basketball player of all time? I mean, if you look at people's top 5 lists, ESPN, no Wilt. CBS, no Wilt. Bleacher Report, no Wilt. Well, you could simply say, well, he only won 2 rings. But why did a guy who could do anything on the court only win 2? His teams were good. Wilt played with 24 All-Stars and 6 Hall of Famers. Well, this video will explain the top 4 reasons that Wilt Chamberlain isn't even in the conversation for the greatest of all time. Hey, it's Casey, host of the AM Hoops YouTube channel and the AM Hoops podcast. Hit subscribe because it helps out the channel, so do notification bells. Still making 5 videos per week, even though we don't have games, but we are marching toward the playoffs at Disney World. For now, let's look back in time at Wilt Chamberlain, why he's not the GOAT. And we begin with reason number 4, he wasn't clutch. Teams he was on constantly underachieved. He never won a title in high school or college, and he only won 2 as a pro. One in 1967 and one in 1972 with the first ever super team, according to Sports Illustrated at the time. He was on the Lakers with Jerry West and Elgin Baylor. Duh. Counting rings matters to a point, but it's not the only factor in the GOAT debate, right? I mean, Bill Russell won 11 to Michael Jordan 6, but MJ is the better all-time player. Well, Wilt's 2 rings make it really hard to consider him the greatest of all time, but the reasons he only won 2 tell the story. His numbers are ridiculous, but in the playoffs they dipped. His career points average was 30 points per game on 54% from the field. In the playoffs though, almost just 22 points per game on 52%. An 8-point drop is huge. The actual greatest players of all time got better in the playoffs, at least they stayed the same. Michael Jordan jumped from 30 points per game on 50% from the field to almost 34 points per game, about the same field goal percentage. LeBron James scores 27 points per game in the regular season, 29 in the playoffs. And speaking of LeBron, we bang on LeBron for having a losing finals record, right? Well, Wilt's record in the conference finals and finals, 48 and 44. His record in elimination games, 10 and 11. In game 7s, 4 and 5. All those numbers tell you he was dominant in the regular season, but his superpowers failed him in the playoffs. He was not clutch. One of Wilt's opponents during his time in the league was a guy named Rick Barry. Now, he won a title with the Golden State Warriors, but you guys probably know him from doing the granny shot from the free throw line. Among the people he played against, he was known for giving 0 about what people thought of him. He was not afraid to be a jerk, which is why we got this spicy quote about Wilt from Rick Barry. Quote, "I'll say what most players feel, which is that Wilt is a loser. He is terrible in big games. He knows he's gonna lose and be blamed for the loss, so he dreads it, and you could see it in his eyes. And anyone who's ever played with him will agree with me. Regardless of whether they admit it publicly, when it comes down to the closing minutes of a tough game, an important game, he doesn't want the ball. He doesn't want any part of the pressure. It is at these times that greatness is determined, and Wilt doesn't have it. There is no way you can compare him to a pro like Bill Russell or a Jerry West. These are clutch competitors. And that is what we love so much about Michael Jordan. He was so clutch. Once he started getting to the finals, he never lost. It's the big knock on LeBron James. Early in his career, he didn't have that clutch gene, which he eventually developed. Wilt never did develop it. Reason number 3, he was selfish. Instead of being obsessed with helping his team win, Wilt was obsessed with his own stats. In 1968, he led the league in assists. but he would pass up easy shots to get them. He would rather get the dime at the expense of his team. Now, this does show how dominant he was on the court, but despite being so dominant, he was traded twice. The Lakers actually had a chance to get him in '68 after losing in the finals to the Celtics in back-to-back years. They could have had the most dominant regular season player in his prime to push them over the edge and win championships. They said no thank you. The Lakers owner at the time polled his players. They voted 9-2 against trading for Wilt. They would have given up little to nothing as well. Can you imagine a team possibly getting Michael Jordan or LeBron James, the two guys, or Magic Johnson, whoever you want to say, for almost nothing, and a team voting no? Here's another example of his selfish reputation. The year he averaged 50 points per game, Bill Russell was voted MVP. That's back when valuable meant more than just stats. It says a lot about that era and about Wilt that he could average half 100 in someone else's MVP. Reason number 2, he wasn't dominant on defense. Now, he was good on defense, but he underachieved, and you cannot be considered the GOAT if defense isn't your priority. All the greats do it on both ends. LeBron James has been all defense 6 times, Michael Jordan 9 times, Kobe 12 times. But that's only one measure of how well a guy plays defense, right? I mean, we know LeBron can guard every player 1 through 5. We don't need to know how many all defense teams he's on to know that. Wilt was all about stats, and a lot of defense doesn't show up on the box score, especially during his career. Could Wilt have been the best defensive player every year? Probably, but Wilt was about Wilt's stats. They did not track how many blocks or steals a player got for Wilt's entire career. If they did, he probably would have tried to lead the league in blocks and steals and be the best defensive player of his generation. You know what they did track though? Fouls. There's a Wikipedia page out there called List of Career Achievements by Wilt Chamberlain. If you scroll down and down and down, because he was ridiculous, it says that he never fouled out of a game during his entire career. An unbelievable achievement. Guys who played against him, though, didn't really see it that way. Bill Simmons points out in his book that John Havlicek once wrote, quote, "Wilt's greatest idiosyncrasy was not fouling out. He had never fouled out of a high school, college, or professional game, and that was one record he was determined to protect. When he got that 4th foul, his game would change. I don't know how many potential victories he may have cheated his team out of by not really playing after he got in foul trouble." Ouch. And the number one reason that Wilt Chamberlain is not considered the GOAT, rule changes and changes in pace. We know that Wilt was ahead of his time physically. For part of his career, guys were paid so little they had to have summer jobs just to keep up. Elite athletes weren't exactly turning to the NBA. Dudes smoked cigarettes at halftime. But rule changes are a part of why his numbers are ridiculous too. One rule, for example, that Wilt took advantage of for the first half of his career was a tweak in offensive goaltending. It was legal to redirect a teammate's jump shot before it hit the rim. He could do that in the 100-point game, for example, his 78-point game, his 73-point game, etc. Also, teams didn't play defense for most of Wilt's career for some reason. Conditioning probably had a lot to do with that, also subpar coaching. Every game was like an all-star game where they would play fast as hell and just try to outscore the other team. Of the 3 highest scoring team seasons ever, 2 are from the 1960s, and you see number 1 there, the Nuggets? Yeah, they had the 3-point line. The most field goal attempts ever, all teams from Wilt's era. With so many shots to go around, no wonder he scored so many points, and his rebounding stats were inflated too. During his 50-point per game season, Wilt averaged about 40 field goal attempts a game and 17 free throws. Compare it to this era. James Harden's biggest season, 25 field goal attempts and 11 free throws, and Harden is considered the biggest ball hog ISO player in the NBA. Bottom line, the game was so much different when Wilt played, and his competition was so much less, that putting his numbers in the context of today just doesn't work. And if Wilt doesn't have his unbelievable statistics to lean on, what does he have? Now, I probably should have said this earlier, but I do think Wilt Chamberlain is amazing. Like, I'm not trying to rag on Wilt, I'm just nitpicking. He is one of like the top 10 or 15 greatest of all time, but he is not in that GOAT debate. He is not a winner for the reasons that we just laid out. And I really think that Wilt is the perfect example of why we don't just look at stats or the box score. Because the box score says easily Wilt is the GOAT, but in the team game of the NBA, he's not even close. Support AM Hoops and click subscribe. Don't miss a daily NBA video.